after this will be much more technical than what I will talk about today. And the reason for that is I have been always obsessed about how we can use technology in what we are doing rather than technology being an objective for myself. So it's always a tool, not an objective. I think it's quite important distinction because sometimes it actually can cause problems. So what do I mean by that? I have been in financial services about 15 years, and so it's not that long actually compared to many people around me. And what I have been quite interested in is how we could use technology to actually create competitive advantage. So I have been in businesses which did that, in electronic trading, in market structures, and so forth. So about 4.5 years ago, I ran into this thing called Bitcoin. And the moment that I learned about Bitcoin, and actually immediately when I learned about blockchain, which actually empowered Bitcoin, I was quite interested in how to use it for the next, in this whole concept of next generation in financial services. So that's what I am interested in. So State Street is a large custodian bank with a huge asset management arm to it, and I do not know how many trillions we have under assets under management, but it's one of the top 10 systematically important institutions globally, and there's a huge responsibility to it. My role at State Street is to look into what we can do to build new products, new market structures, new flows, completely new ideas around using these emerging technologies. And it's not only blockchain, it's everything. And frankly, in some ways, I do not mind which one or what technology it is. But it is important to understand these technologies to get ideas around them. And in fact, of course, I'm finding myself in the middle of this digital transformation wave. It is very important to build something where business, technology, different types of people work together. So those are the type of things that keep me busy day to day. Just with that, just wanted to tell you what I want to talk about first. Hold on. If I could only. Okay. So this is not really a technology story, it's a business story. I think it always is a business story. Okay, so that's from my perspective it is. It's very hard to actually think about a talk for this audience because I wasn't quite sure who would be around. Would it be more financial services people or it will be broader audience? I am quite interested in all kinds of different subjects from other industries, but I'm not an expert around those at all. But I think there are similarities in between different industries and convergence of trends. So this conversation, this talk will be about convergence of trends, but divergence of questions, and I will explain to you what it is. So we, I think, are going through a phase. This is more capital markets and financial services context. We have been going through some blurring lines in our business. So we have been going through different types of market structures. We have been going through markets where private and public markets become closer to closer with each other. So you have crowdfunding, you have peer-to-peer lending, you have robo-advisors. So all of these things, as far as I'm concerned, are not necessarily a technology story. They are below the lines, larger spectrum of new business concepts emerging in our marketplace. So, for example, I worked at an exchange for a while, and I have been quite interested in why wouldn't we be having a crowdfunding offering within our own exchange? And I think it's happening right now in exchanges, right? So it's like public markets and private markets, and if it go further, which I'm going to talk about, ICOs and all those kind of things are all about somewhat around capital formation, and this is the new market. Some examples, I mean, the clients' needs are getting to be very similar. I am coming from a background where we always deal with institutional clients. My knowledge of what people do with retail clients is very limited, other than my own personal experience. But the needs of the institutional clients are becoming very close to the needs of the retail clients. So that's actually quite interesting, right? And at the end of the day, if we go through that, lots of examples, but if we go through each one of them, what we see is in order to cope with this, what's going on, we need to be able to create new products on demand and expand what we are offering to our clients through a spectrum of different business options and choices, right? So that's why, and do this in a way where we understand our risk, we understand our data, we understand what we are offering to our clients, because it's financial services after all, okay? All of these things mean completely new structures for us. I mean, in my experience, our current structure in financial services cannot enable it. Similar, I think, topics go for other industries as well. We need to change our systems. We need to be like realigning what we are doing to actually almost to be able to offer clients a continuous spectrum of different options, from peer-to-peer lending to, I don't know, invoice discounting, to different options and different spectrum of products. So I will come to blockchain in a second. Okay, so what does it mean? If we actually go through that, and I tell you a bit of a like, stepping back from this, and I will come to this picture in a second. So maybe this is also going to help with the blockchain conversation a bit more. So 4.5 years ago, when I started getting into this topic, I spent a lot of time in very interesting places. I went to lots of very interesting conferences. There was almost nobody who came from financial services in these early days. They were all very interesting type people that, you know, I got to learn know about, and meetups and different types of the places in the world. We had something called color coins, and color coins was the first time that I got very excited about use of blockchain technologies in financial services. It was the concept of potentially programming any bond, any security, anything on Bitcoin blockchain. So it was the very early version of it. And it's so interesting to me, because if I connect that directly to what I was talking about, which is this conversion of trends, I could then create my own instruments with these color coins. This was very early on. So now the next question that comes is, all right, if I create my own instrument with these color coins on Bitcoin blockchain, I have a problem. Because Bitcoin blockchain is a public blockchain. I'm coming from financial services. I know very well that I cannot possibly connect, you know, people to, like I cannot, from financial, normal, more traditional financial services, cannot connect to a public blockchain, because we need to know who is on the network and so forth. And those are all very common knowledge. Then we started, I mean, I was part of a community where we started thinking about what is called permissioned blockchain and blockchains. And in fact, we came up with these words, frankly. It was these phrases for the first time. And it was very interesting. And then we started talking about, there were some colleagues of mine who were talking at that time about money, and Bitcoin as money, and the blockchain as Bitcoin, like the other side of blockchain technologies. That wasn't my background, and frankly, I didn't understand this whole money argument at that time. That technically wasn't my interest. So I was always talking about, you know what, it's not the Bitcoin, it's the blockchain which is underlying technology, and you can do this, then you can close it, do closed versions of it, then you have permissioned versions or so forth. I actually got involved. I was one of the founding advisory board members of Hyperledger because of that, because that was the first example of a chain that was actually permissioned, and it wasn't open, and it didn't have a token. So all those topics have evolved last couple of years. And so from that, just to give you, again, timeline, then we started talking about smart contracts. Smart contracts, I couldn't really make sense of it for a long time, I mean, even though I was one of the first people talking about it. The reason for that is because some of the what we talk about smart contracts is, from a technology perspective, is just anything that's rules-based, right? It's not really that special. But then we started talking about smart contracts in the sense of legal contracts, like real legal contracts. So what does it mean? So legal contracts, in that case, you can actually literally start putting real, for example, derivatives contracts, any contract in an automated place and on an infrastructure. Then that opens up whole new doors for us for creating new products. And it can be anything. Like, for example, at some point in my career, I was working on weather derivatives. I was very interested in weather derivatives. I went and talked to lots of people around in how they were getting about weather data and all that stuff. that can be actually, like all of these like topics, like the derivative and what you can do with on-demand OTC, derivatives is very interesting. So I am talking about this for a reason. So what we are, so then actually the world started changing. People actually started getting interested in Bitcoin and crypto assets again. And this whole, again talking about convergence, I think we are not as anymore separated from this whole idea of cryptocurrencies or blockchain or distributed ledger technologies, permissioned or not. I think now we are at a phase, this is becoming a design problem, engineering problem. So actually we have a whole spectrum of choices in front of us where we can use different type of technologies, different tokens and so forth, and think about how all of these topics are going to come together. And let's now talk about this picture. So if we think about like what is the really futuristic future, I think we are talking about more peer-to-peer models. It doesn't mean peer-to-peer as in there is nobody in the middle. It's more peer-to-peer like Airbnb maybe, which is actually considered to be peer-to-peer, but it's not quite. But we are moving in those platform business models somehow, and ecosystems, right? Bringing our clients to our ecosystem and then giving them tools to do what they do. So that's why we are becoming, this blockchain conversation is shaping up to be really foundational because of that reason. If we actually then break it down, break that whole concept to even more foundational topics, in financial services, the most important things for us is actually, trust is one of them. Risk is another one. Data is, from a technology perspective, data, but I would argue that it's not only data, there is one component to it, it's actually common language, which is the meaning of data, which means the agreement between two parties, because everything is about an agreement in financial services, and in actually many other industries as well, are important, right? And then you have privacy, which is also always in the picture. In financial services, there is as it is a regulated industry, we have regulations. So whatever we do has to solve those problems. So for example, because of that, I am very, very interested in these days in a concept called Semantic Technologies. Like this is basically about the meaning of data. And also when I look at the different types of blockchain technologies, I am very interested in how they deal with this problem. Like how do they carry the meaning of data? Because data itself is useless. And they're so foundational to what's called smart contracts, the meaning of data, right? Then on the right-hand side, and I think we have some very interesting things as well. The nature of money is changing because of all of these topics. This is actually my new interest last year or so. I was staying away from this, but I think I learned a bit. Like there is these discussions about central banks issuing their own cash on digital currencies and things like that, Bitcoin, crypto assets. All of these things are becoming really much more mainstream. And they're also, from one point of view, they are just instruments, right? The next point is then new market structures. Like Alipay is incredibly powerful. By the way, I'm a big fan of what's happening in China and Asia about these topics. It's unbelievable. They just go ahead and do things. Just like here, probably, because we tend to be much more pragmatic about things. Tezos, there is an icon there, even though I should probably be careful because last couple of days there is a big controversy about it. But Tezos is an ICO, initial coin offering. I see all of these things, even though I am not endorsing them because it's too early, but I think the topic is, the trend is there, and it's part of this whole idea of capital formation and so forth. So I think that we absolutely need to be thinking about these topics. There is one more actually benefit to these ICOs, which is very, very real. They are potentially the only way to monetize, I'm not sure only way, I should be careful. One really very prominent way to monetize open source business models. So open source technologies, open source concepts, ecosystems are in our world. We are really all interested in these open source business models, but it's not easy to make money from them for the providers. But this whole utility topic, again, fits right into what we are working on. And actually these ICOs, once they are more regulated and proper and they are done for the right reason, I think are very, very interesting. Seeders is just one example. It's a crowdfunding example. And the next one is, well, I try to use icons. I'm not very good at it because it's not my DNA probably. But it is basically about IoT and the smart contract. So imagine, like, for someone like me, I mean, obviously this weather derivatives topic, I mean, directly connecting to the devices, to contracts, and people creating their contracts. I mean, I cannot imagine that that's not the future, right? And I have to say, even though these are very institutional banking type topics, I think there is, again, a convergence of these topics across different industries and across different segments, even in banking, frankly. Institutional, it's not only institutional banking. Ultimately, the whole idea is, as we use these technologies, I think we are going to bring the financial services closer to the real economy, as if we can sort out these problems around trust, agreement, risk, and so forth. I talk about normally a lot about regulations because I think automation of regulations is very important, but I think I will skip that one here. And the next one is, and I will probably start finishing because I tend to talk long, is, okay, so it's all good, but I like to leave with divergence of questions because I think that we have been, these things that we are going through, blockchain technologies, normally, honestly, if it happened about 10, 15 years ago, I would have thought that I wouldn't even know about these technologies, frankly. I don't think that I would even be talking, we would be talking about it today. I believe the reason that we are talking about these technologies here today and we are interested in it is not about technology itself. It is about the time and the overall circumstances that we are all going through in our broader worlds, okay? So that's why I think I mean, we are thinking about new market structures, new ways of using capital, managing risk, and so forth, and also provenance and identifying different assets. All of these things, I think we would have done it without really making a big deal if we weren't going through something bigger ourselves. But the question is, the journey itself is a big deal because I do not know if we actually even understand exactly how to go to the next generation, this whole futuristic future. My word today is actually threefold. One, today's legacy systems. Second, emerging data, like how do we actually put all data in one place and deal with it. And then distributed ledger technologies. And frankly, I also have interest in even more futuristic technology topics like quantum computing and so forth. So it's a very, very broad spectrum of very big range of topics. And, but we need to be doing all of those things all at once. And then we need to be thinking about new market structures, new flows. Some people will be disintermediated. So what does it mean? There will be, and there will be issues around privacy. What does the digital identity mean? Digital identity is a huge, huge topic, right? Common language. I mean, I know that we, not only us, in aerospace and other industries, we are all putting these ontologies together, like defining technologies. So what does it really, really mean? Cybersecurity is always the elephant in the room. And it's so big that I can't even talk about it, probably. And then the energy, all of these things consume a lot of energy. I think we need to think about new types of dealing with energy. I will leave the future of work because it's a bit too much. So can I just stop here? And I realized I didn't really talk about the foundations of blockchains that much. If there are any questions, let me know. I tell you what I think about different blockchain technologies and all that, whatever it is. I just stop here. Questions?
It would be great if you can also touch upon it, briefly.
Different types of blockchain technologies. Okay, I'm just thinking about. So I think that. I mean, obviously two major streams, and we will be talking about this, by the way, I'm looking forward to the talk later, is Hyperledger and what's happening in Ethereum. But there are a lot of, and Ripple, of course, I would say, I shouldn't say only two, but it's, I categorize them in, at different places. And I think, though, it's becoming really, really hard for me to think about these technologies in a way that are very segregated from their business use these days. But I give you a very concrete example. At State Street, we have been working on Hyperledger. And and we have a number of people who have been working on the code and a number of, and so forth. So, there are a number of things. But then on the other hand, we're evaluating lots of different technologies as well. And there's obviously it's not about the preference of a specific technology or not. And we have been working on a project which is called Settlement Coin Project, with another technology provider. And there are a number of other ones that we have been working on, depending on what the business case is. So it's not really about, I think, specific technology itself. When we don't really think about specific technologies themselves, but at this stage, what we are trying to do is to think about a world where, from a business perspective, how it will all start to look like. And I think interoperability of these technologies is the most interesting question to solve overall. And within that, I'm quite interested in how we actually exchange data and so forth between different protocols. Yeah. Yeah.
Where do you see blockchain in health? Where do you see blockchain in healthcare industries?
Okay, that's not my industry. No, I think, okay, so that's really not my industry at all, so I cannot really talk too much about it. But I tell you this, I think the observation there, and I do actually know a few people who approach me in other places who actually are looking into creating efficiencies, and it's actually even at the government scale, around provenance and data and like sharing of data, patient data, and all those kind of things. But they also come with all kinds of privacy concerns, obviously. So I am not quite sure where those are, but I do think that the topic of this common language, privacy, and sharing of data, so that it's going to be more like open. There is this whole concept of open networks, right? Open data in some ways. If open doesn't mean it's really open. It actually needs to be like privacy should be managed. But it means that it can be leveraged by for different users, and there's obviously it's a numbers game. The more data you have for drug tests or the other things, or diagnosis or whatever it is, then better it is. But it's not my industry.
Probably mostly to keep the data, I believe, for a little time being. It
sounds like that to me, but I may be very short-sighted. For me, in financial services, it's data plus agreement. Very much. There are projects, not blockchain projects, and also it depends on your definition of healthcare industry. There are projects which are borderline other like financial services and insurance, and like around payments of insurance contracts and things like that, and getting paid. The hospitals getting paid through some kind of a clearinghouse. Earlier than they normally would do, and those kind of things. So they are borderline like my industry. But so healthcare is also, I am assuming that it's a quite broad industry.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Yep, sure.
Is there any service that State Street applies using blockchain technology, or is it still on R&D, or is it still on research? And the second question is this State Street is doing it by itself or using third parties?
That's a very good question, and I'll explain to you. It's a question I can probably visually explain. So I see this blockchain topic as almost in circles. Okay, so there is the most inner circle is technology and technology, like tech for tech. What it means is it's like databases. I mean, I really shouldn't know what it is about, right? Our accounting systems or whatever it is, whatever it is, all the technologies we have, like how are we going to update them to be much more modern, and then, you know, technically they could be using these technologies. So there's that component. So we are looking into projects like that. And then you then start expanding into business and tech. So it's a technology-enabled business, so there are ideas around like the different business use cases around what we can do in different parts of security, capital markets, for example. Then you expand the circle. We have projects around all of those. And it's not experimentation. We are really, I mean, it's experimentation, but what I mean is, it's not just for the sake of experimentation. We are looking to do the business case around that. We are mapping flows and all that. Then you go to the next circle. Then you have your clients and your partners in that circle. So what that means is you then start looking into different projects around what you can do with a number of clients together. And this is all about platforms and ecosystems, how we can bring them on the same platform together. There are certain, I mean, imagine, and also, by the way, this bank specifically is really mostly, I mean, it's a huge custodian bank. So there are lots of processes that are really back office, you know, how the money moves and the custody of assets and so forth. So, you know, those are the topics that, and we have the largest asset managers in the world as our clients. So you can do a lot with that. And so that's the next circle. And we have partners, similar partners. And then the last bit is what we are doing. Actually, I would argue probably, you can argue they may be the same. We also are working on, there is one project that's very much public with a number of other banks. We are working on something called utility settlement coin, where we are one of the 11 banks building, in essence, a cash instrument which is like a central bank, which is like a central bank money. What I mean, it's like an asset-backed cash instrument. So what it means is central bank money is considered to be risk-free and credit risk-free, basically. And the cash instrument having those attributes, it's not central bank cash, but it's having those attributes and being able to transfer it between the banks with distributed ledger technologies actually has a lot of benefits, liquidity benefits, potential balance sheet benefits, risk benefits, and so forth. So that's a project that we are working on with 11 other banks, and that's actually quite interesting as well. So it's really, we are going through this every day. It's not like we are developing our strategy and trying to figure out how things are going to fit together. That's actually very much around, that's kind of what I'm doing with a class of people. This is actually the type of things that we are looking at. But it is a spectrum of things that you go from like one to another and then broaden. Okay? I'm told I need to finish. Good. Thank you so much.